Welcome to Canadian Justice. I'm Christine Van Gyn. Prime Minister Trudeau has announced that he is resigning and a Liberal leadership race is underway to replace him. Now that Trudeau has made his intention to resign clear, it's a good time to look back at how he will be remembered, especially his legal, constitutional, and civil liberties legacy. In announcing his planned resignation, Trudeau also announced that Parliament would be prorogued. This term of Parliament is going to be ending, it's going to be on a break. What does that mean for the bills that were, until now, working their way through the legislative process? Here today to discuss all of that is Canadian Constitution Foundation's Executive Director, Joanna Baron. Joanna, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about this. Now, I want to start with Trudeau's legacy. And I think the broader question is, how should we think about his legal or constitutional legacy to the extent that he has one?
Yeah, so Justin Trudeau is not exactly a constitutional scholar, although he's been a very effective politician. And so I don't think there's like an overarching narrative or thread to his legal legacy. But if I were to identify two things that sort of mark a lot of the actions that he took, one is this sort of, I would say, soft social justice ideology that comes out in things like the Cannabis Act and his response to allegations of genocide, but we'll get into those things. And the second is really, and this is true of almost all politicians, just political expediency, what he thought was necessary at the time to stay in power.
Now, I think that you brought up he's not a constitutional scholar, and one of the things that's really interesting is of course his father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, he was, and I think that there's this expression that history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, and I think that one of the things that Trudeau Jr. is always going to be remembered for is actually one of the same things his father is going to be remembered for, which is abusing emergency legislation. In his father's case, in Pierre Elliott Trudeau's case, it was the War Measures Act. In Junior's case, it was the Emergencies Act. So, what do you think of that? Do you think that's going to be a part of his legacy? That's what I think.
I mean, absolutely. He was the first politician to invoke the Emergencies Act in its history, which of course was drafted to replace the War Measures Act. And the funny thing is that in both cases of both men, I would say they're equally shocking. But it's just fresher in our memories, not just that he invoked the Emergencies Act, but that he took punitive measures like freezing bank accounts and cracking down on peaceful protests. And then, in my opinion, he essentially lied when he testified, or at very least, he twisted language to justify and twisted the language of the Emergencies Act to defend his invocation of it when clearly the government did not have the requisite justification or evidence to meet that very stringent test.
Now, of course, this is an issue that you and I are sort of seized with, since we both are with the Canadian Constitution Foundation, which is the charity that brought that successful legal challenge to Justin Trudeau's invocation of that emergency legislation. But I just wanted to update viewers. There is an appeal underway. What can you tell us about the status of that appeal?
So that will be heard in early February over 2 days at the Federal Court of Appeal in Toronto. And our lawyers, Sujit Chaudhry, Janani Shanmuganathan, and the whole team, were working very hard on it. And we're really prepared to respond very forcefully to uphold Justice Mosley's federal court decision and preserve the precedent that the government cannot invoke the Emergencies Act unless it is truly a tool of last resort, as was not the case during the Freedom Convoy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're certainly going to have some episodes of Canadian Justice about that appeal. Now, you've written an op-ed in the Hub, and one of the themes that about Trudeau's legal legacy, and one of the themes that you talk about in that op-ed is his legacy of online censorship. And Justin Trudeau had not just one, but three pieces of legislation that were introduced on the topic of online censorship. We've got to go to commercial break, but I'm just going to set this up for the next segment. And those three pieces of legislation were the Online News Act, the Digital Streaming Act, and the Online Harms Act. And each of them has sort of really different and broad and specific implications for the right to freedom of expression in Canada, they all kind of ended with at different stages. But I do agree with you that that is going to form a core part of Justin Trudeau's legacy, this regulation of speech on the internet. When we come back from break, I want to get into all of that.